Previously on Detour Hotel.
Kevin cut open one of the balloons to reveal a sticky teardrop. He nodded his head to himself and flicked it free from the rubber with a pair of tweezers. Felicia climbed up onto the bed and crawled across to sit next to Kevin. "One of those bags is yours. From the Nayarit boys," she said. Kevin turned to look at her. "Thanks. Generous those guys are." Chapter 15. May of 2010 began with a tempest. On the first day of the month, a particularly strong line of storms pushed east from the Mississippi River Valley up the ancient slope of the western Appalachian Incline. Soon after the frontal boundary passed over metropolitan Nashville, the easterly motion of the trough stalled, and this complex meteorological setup allowed what 3 of the 4 local news stations referred to as an atmospheric conveyor belt to deposit moisture from the Gulf of Mexico into the Nashville area for nearly 36 hours. Squalls indefatigably rolled into the Cumberland River Basin day and night. 7 inches of rain in a day is crazy. The chances of it happening 2 days in a row is monumentally slim. Yet Metro Nashville did indeed experience nearly 14 inches of rain in 2 days. After a lengthy technical post-mortem, it was determined that Nashville had experienced the 1,000-year storm. The 1,000-year storm is an occurrence that typically exists only in the realm of speculation. The textbook definition of a 1,000-year storm is a rain event that has a 0.01% chance of occurring in any given year. It's a purely statistical calculation. It's not a matter of Gnostic schedule or built-up pressure. It can, and it will happen. A 1,000-year storm could occur 2 years in a row. It could happen twice in a year. It may not happen for 10,000 years. The chances of it not occurring in a 1,000-year period are almost 38%. In a 2,000-year period, the chances of not seeing a 1,000-year storm are still about 14%, no matter the volume or location. Those unsexy facts were clumsily explained in news segments underlain by footage of people who cared very little for statistics as they haplessly operated John boats in residential streets. A few choice shots of soaked people in peril were repeated ad nauseum, but none of them were any match for the clip, shown dozens of times per day on one local channel, of a sad-looking black lab that had been rescued by a stranger and wrapped up in a clay-stained Titan's blanket. 14 inches of rainfall across millions of acres of land creates an unfathomable volume of water. Some of it gets immediately swallowed by the soil. A small percentage pools on the surface in pits, potholes, rooftops, and in the soak of tree leaves or window panes. The majority strikes the ground and is shed as runoff, bound for rivers and streams first as creeping sheet flow, then as shallow concentrated trickles and depressions, and finally as rapidly coalescing channels of raging water. This surge carries oil, sediment, and trash in a gnarly first flush of righteous flow from every point in the watershed. After the floatable debris comes the slow, hulking, sediment-laden floodwaters. More than 250 billion gallons of runoff were destined by some circuitous path for the Cumberland. By May 3rd, big muddy slugs of floodwater were in the streets of Lower Broadway and on the stage at the Grand Ole Opry. Some folks like to refer to it as Nashville's Katrina. Though comparisons to Katrina are dubious at best, there was a pronounced human toll. The loss of dozens of lives, buildings destroyed, livelihoods ruined. Orange silt and blue skies were the palette for the sinking despair of cleanup. There would be fundraisers, concerts, funerals, home makeovers, illnesses, divorces, and demolitions. Yet the exhalation of destroyed material did have an equal and opposite reaction. Growth, opportunity, and an influx of new people to Nashville. Kevin Hitchcock was working for an industrial cleanup conglomerate in Fresno, California in May of 2010. His girlfriend had recently left him. His sister had moved 2,000 miles away. He had stolen from his mother one too many times. He had 3 roommates with 3 separate and distinct drug problems. He could remember cracking open a Diet Coke as he wandered into the staging room to find his supervisor looking for relocation volunteers for a new high-volume disaster relief deployment. It would be semi-permanent with the possibility of long-term work. Still dusty from hours of scooping pulverized drywall, Kevin read the announcement with interest. Nashville, huh? His supervisor didn't look up from his clipboard. Could be thousands of properties. You interested? A bunch of guys milled around with work shirts over their shoulders and time cards hanging by lanyard from their tan necks. Kevin looked around the room and subconsciously expanded his chest to exude posture. Never been to Tennessee. Could be cool, I guess. It's cool if you're into scooping mud for 10 hours a day, Giordano said. Kevin scoffed. Whatever, man. Cleanups are cleanups. I bet it's not dusty. What kind of place are they putting us up in? You're staying at the Screw You Inn. No amenities, his supervisor said. Giordano and company found this comment hilarious. Seriously, though, I might want to do this. The supervisor spit out a piece of gum and looked at his clipboard. Seriously, the room's, I don't know, man, probably an extended stay. I'll stick your name on the list. It's probably at least 10 weeks. But pay ain't bad, I'll be honest with you. No state taxes. I bet they got some whiskey out there too, boy. Kevin nodded his head. He felt a buzz in his pocket. Giordano leaned in and patted his shoulder. He had a ring of cleanliness around his mouth from where the rebreather rested. Go get it, Flacco. What else you got to do? Kevin shrugged and checked his message. It was from his roommate, asking for him to pick up, of all things, bananas, cat food, and an eighth of weed. Kevin took off his hard hat and scratched his short blonde hair. It was soaked with salty sweat. There was no way it could be as hot as Fresno out east, he thought. He recalled the heat-related blackouts from the summer of 2007, the feeling of 1,000 hair dryers pointed at him from all directions and the stale air of powerless, sunlit rooms. He'd been working at Circuit City at the time, and everyone on duty was forced to form a phalanx in front of the inoperable sliding glass doors. They'd had to pull the stubborn doors apart to exit and push them back together to lock them, a task that forever gave Kevin a respect for motorized entryways and the benign ease with which the contraptions would glide open with a wave of a hand. They then stood arm in arm, earning $9.45 an hour each in the grotesque 112-degree heat to protect against looting. No one had approached the human barricade. It was too hot to shop for home electronics, let alone steal any. Casey passed out. A second text message came through. Same exact message. Bananas and cat food. This burnouts, he thought. He looked out the window of the corrugated metal building and considered the prospect of Tennessee. Barbecue. College football. Good college football. The SEC. Blonde sorority girls. Whiskey. Save a horse, ride a cowboy. Those were his first impressions, but he knew that he knew very, very little about the South. People were nice, allegedly, but were probably super racist. Giordano was right for once. What could 10 weeks hurt, especially in the summer? 10 weeks without Philip and Kim jamming him up would probably recharge his batteries. He picked up a ballpoint pen and started to fill out the information on the application. For preferred length of deployment, he wrote down indefinite and a smiley face. Chapter 16. 6.5 years later, Kevin had grown familiar with the panoply of Nashville scenes. He recalled working late nights in the humid miasma of spring at that joke of a cocktail bar in Midtown, summer's idle bloom of jasmine and moonflowers all throughout Laughlin Springs, waking to seek out February's finest Sunday morning smoked sausage gravy, the cigarette and chewing gum aura of DIY girls with bleached hair and nose rings, October smog advisories, June's lightning plasma tang, and the billions of data points in between. He fashioned himself an unironic poet of the city's funk. There was a silkiness to his memories, specifically those of the dancing amber shadows of votive candles at the makeshift seance with the Indiana Avenue crew, 7/8 Alabama kids, all but Kevin. The striking odor of juniper, the cheap chemicals they put in candles from Target, what Kevin could only describe as door frame grime, and coleslaw served from an aquamarine Melmac bowl lying on the skidded-up hardwood floor among them. Anna had made it. That house was demolished the following spring. Kevin was reminded every 1st of May of the pungent odor of the river's sediment. That dank undertone would persist until winter introduced the joy of chimney smoke and dry leaves, the sideways sun of solstice afternoons. He smelled Nashville when he was indoors or on his bike, in trying times or in auspicious circumstances, and even in dreams. It was the result of soil, evapotranspiration, the turbulence of the eternal sinusoid of the seasons, something pre-human and non-human. The scents themselves weren't static, their local fluctuation defined them. He's in the middle of attempting to articulate these vicissitudes of scent and memory to 2 young women who have made the mistake of allowing him to bum a cigarette and lean over the rail next to them at Widow's Peak, a nouveau dive bar in 5 Points. The Peak is known for its strong service night pours of vodka and tequila. It's starting to pop off as midnight approaches. The women have finished their pizza and vodka cranberries and are closely guarding their smoking spot under the dome of a roll-up space heater. Kevin is totally up in their shit. It's like a gorgeous rust. The water here is dank. Don't drink the water if anyone's haven't told you that. The Cumberland's gross. We call it Cumberland Punch. The tap water. He squeezed the butt of his cigarette between the middle finger and thumb of his left hand. He was wearing an inside-out t-shirt beneath an unzipped Misfits hoodie. His thin blonde hair fluttered slowly around his face in the breeze. I haven't heard that. Cumberland Punch, Michelle said. She half-heartedly smirked as she spun through her news feed. Yep, it's a thing. But I feel like the whole city kind of smells like the water does. It's a dingy perfume. Muddy, but not like Memphis. Memphis is gross, he explained. We kind of just moved to East Nasty, Michelle told him. She pulled up the neckline of her shirt and changed apps. I'm shocked. No one says East Nasty unless they just moved here. Where'd you come in from? The girls paused and tacitly decided who would speak. Kevin flexed his hands and cracked his knuckles. Madison just moved here from Chicago. I'm from Franklin, though, Michelle told him. Madison looked away, clearly agitated that her real name had been used in a conversation with this tweaker ex-skater, probably 30-something-year-old guy. Who knew? He was totally jamming them up. Michelle was leaving the door wide open for him to abduct and murder them as far as she was concerned. I knew at least one of you was from somewhere else. I grew up in Fresno. That city smells like totally different. Asphalt, dust, it's hella dry out there. It smells metallic. Fresno. Cool. Madison flipped through stories as fast as possible. Yeah, it sucked. I moved here 6 years ago, just right after the flood. You probably remember the flood, right? He ashed the cigarette and looked around the parking lot behind him. Neither girl answered. I need another drink, Madison said. Yeah, all right, get after it. Go inside and tell Porter to give you a Kevin discount. I work here. Kevin nodded his head. Madison kicked Michelle under the table. Hey, you mind if I have a drink of that water? An untouched plastic cup of ice water was on the table before them, straw still wearing its hat of torn paper wrapping. Michelle handed it to him. I thought you said not to drink the water. He smirked and put a pill in his mouth. They watched him swallow and immediately launch into another diatribe. Yeah, I assume all risks. I know. I think we filter it, though. I've seen the filter. I gotta take my medicine, though. Sorry about that. So get this. There's this place a few blocks from here where they're about to put in a movie theater, but it's like still a construction site. Lately, a bunch of cool people have been hanging out there and partying. Some of the dudes are a little rail-righty, but they're interesting dudes. They're like right on the railroad tracks. But there's bonfires every night. Some of the guys are like artist types. You girls smoke? The girls drew out a mysterious pause before deflecting. Maybe. You should head out there and we'll meet you there. Madison locked her phone and smiled at Kevin. He tossed the cigarette down and crushed the ember out with the toe of his Chuck Taylors. Yeah, good call. I better go check out if they got the fire started. Madison nodded her head and smiled. Have fun. Alright, but let me tell you how to get there. Write this down. Kevin leaned over and tapped Michelle's phone. She snatched it away and winced at him. He recoiled and looked down at his feet. She unlocked the phone out of his line of sight. Sorry, shouldn't have touched. It's fine, just tell me, she said. Madison was up and creeping toward the patio door. You gotta head toward downtown and take a right on 6th Street. There's some condos there and it's a little road, but there's a park back in there. If you follow the sidewalk back along the park toward the soccer fields, you can go through this gate, or it's kind of like a broken fence, and that leads to this area with lots of bridges under Ellington, and that's where the hangout is, up against some train tracks. You'll know it because up under one of the bridges, there's this huge bunch of graffiti. Under a railroad bridge with a lot of graffiti. Yeah, that sounds completely legit, Madison said. Kevin laughed. It's the most legit spot you'll find. This shit isn't on Nash Vegas style Instagram giveaways and whatnot. It's where the cool kids hide out. Alright, I'm gonna split. I will definitely see you there. Madison and Michelle gave him a wave and, with their heads down, they ducked back into the bar. Kevin pulled his hood over his head and jumped on his bike. They needed to unwind, he thought. Porter could totally vouch for him. He took off down the block. Kevin could really smell the city tonight. It was warm for December. He was picking up hints of mud and camphor, and he could visualize the cacophony of each note of every bar of music being made in a 2-mile radius. The mingling drum beats were like shoes in a dryer, all the songs being written that very minute, and meanwhile the hyacinths were sleeping away in the dirt. He pedaled around the corner of 6th and hopped off the bike as the pavement ended. He walked the bike through the ratty chain link aperture. 6 cinder blocks were standing upright around a muddy ash pit. Atop the southwest block was a man whose upper torso was split into darkness by the bridge's shadow. But before him spread the awful flotsam of garbage that accompanied wooded party spots and transient camps. Bottle caps, plastic bags, wrappers, styrofoam, sodden cardboard, empty over-the-counter blister packs, black and mild mouthpieces, shreds of what may have been velvet. The man spoke when he saw Kevin walking his bike into the territory. "You scored tonight, Flacco?" "Depends on what you're asking," Kevin said. He tossed the bike into the low, winter limp bushes. "Gone just fine with me. I could probably pop a Xanny if you had one." "I have a little bit of weed, but I'm saving it. These girls are gonna come out here." The man chuckled. "Ain't no girls coming here." He lit a cigarette. "You'll see, dude," Kevin told him. He copped a squat atop one of the cinder blocks. He took out a fresh pack of cigarettes and beat them against his palm. He undid the gold seal and tossed the plastic wrap aside. "Wesley said he was going across to Buchanan to get some junk. He'll be back at 2. "Nah, I'm good. I'm going home tonight," Kevin said. Lucky you. Why'd you come out here anyway?" the man asked. "It's the real deal out here. No judgment. Y'all are my people." Kevin lit the cigarette. His counterpart remained unstirred. "There's always judgment, Flacco." "What, like from God? Don't give me that." Kevin put the lighter back in his pocket. "These days everybody thinks they're God. They judge like they're God. Same thing as far as I'm concerned." "Heavy shit, Gordo," Kevin said. He crossed his legs and stared at the dirt. Kevin blew a cloud of smoke and tapped his fingers as the pill's buzz set in. Getting his heart rate up from the bike ride had really spread out the effect. He bobbed his head with a sick little drum beat in his mind's eye. A distant train horn hooted. The red L and C atop the Life and Casualty Tower glowed downtown. "Are we gonna make a fire? How cold's it supposed to get tonight?" Kevin asked. "Low 40s. That's not too bad." Kevin bounced his knees up and down. Man, Madison was gorgeous. She wasn't like the other girls that were usually up at the spot. She looked at him for that one moment and let her guard down, and it was perfect. She liked to have a shield up. She didn't need it with Kevin. She could unwind. He nibbled on the butt of the cigarette. "Hey, I'm gonna pack a bowl if you want to take a hit," Kevin said. He hastily jammed a bud down into the Pyrex aperture of the piece. "I'll get on in the second round. I decided I'm gonna hang for a while," Gordo said as he sat back and crossed his arms. Kevin flicked the plastic lighter to life. He inhaled and thought about Mallory. God, she was fine. Wait, it was Madison. Yeah, Madison was going to be here any minute. The steel I-beams of the highway overpass slowly dripped as the temperature hit the dew point. Rail signals down the line flipped from red to green in shiny fractured stars as Kevin nodded off. "I don't party like I used to. I probably should have cut that pill in half," he thought. He leaned forward and dangled his hands through his lap. He snapped his head up as he fought sleep. Gordo lit a cigarette and crossed his legs. "Flacco, you good?" Kevin didn't answer. Gordo sighed. "You took pills like an idiot. I know you." Kevin gurgled through a snore. Gordo exhaled and rubbed his face. "No one's showing up here. No one but you." Minutes later, Kevin melted down from the cinder block and curled up on his side in the dirt. Gordo walked over and pawed through Kevin's hoodie pocket. There was a pill bottle with no label. 2 pills left. Gordo brought them close to his face to investigate. Probably oxy from what he could tell. He put the bottle back in Kevin's pocket. "How hard you out, kid?" Kevin did not reply. Gordo squatted and slid a piece of cardboard under Kevin's shoulders. He lifted Kevin and laid him on the flattened half of a box that had previously held Dixie cups. He took a deep breath and put his hands behind his head. On the wall before him in the shadows were huge black lines of graffiti. A mile down the line, Wesley White stumbled into the clearing of the rail bridge abutment, hands in his pockets, breathing hard, heading back from his score, bound for the Detour Hotel. Chapter 17. Rin's apartment is on the second floor of a recently constructed complex on McFerrin Avenue. She hated the complex's bland and meaningless name, Statesman, but had fallen in love with its demure appearance. The color of the recycled brickwork and the mid-century modern angles of the building subtly reminded Rin of the mid-Atlantic, Baltimore or suburban Maryland or parts of Norfolk that were built in a certain era. The bricks didn't have hard and clean edges like the newer developments in Germantown or Hillsborough Village. There was a character to their grit, and each one protruded from the underlying grout by over a half an inch. The apartment is less than a 5-minute walk from the bars, venues, and restaurants of Five Points. 2 of the 4 units in her cluster are Airbnbs that are booked every weekend, including Christmas and Thanksgiving, for the next year and a half. In addition to her own apartment, Rin has a month left on the lease for the unit next door. It's currently sitting empty. That's where Kevin used to live. Rin and her partner Lauren are drinking at a cafe table in the kitchen on a weeknight. Nobody calls her Lauren, though. She's Hopeless. Hopeless received her nickname in driver's ed class after causing automotive and property damage in multiple incidents. The name didn't just stick. It was an epiphany for the 16-year-old misfit. Hopeless was a lifestyle. It adequately described her attempts at careers, engaging in socially acceptable behavior, and, before she'd met Rin, romance. She has a tattoo of a rope around her neck. She's myopic to a negative 3.75 and is never seen without thick-framed, dirty glasses. She wears them in the shower. Hopeless works at a non-profit spay-neuter clinic because she claims that it minimizes human contact and maximizes doggo time. It relieved Hopeless that Rin had initially introduced herself as Rin and had refused to reveal her given name to the small group of semi-strangers and friends of friends, all of whom were dressed in elaborate Halloween-appropriate garb except for Hopeless and Rin. "I knew within seconds, this motherfucker gets me," she often says as she tells the tale of how they'd gotten through the awkward night by making up silly dances and developing gruesome backstories for the fictional serial killers that they were allegedly dressed up as: Helga Stabsworth, Hopeless, and Alicia Chopsley, Rin. Hopeless typically does most of the talking, which is exactly what's going on at Rin's folding metal dinner table. "Matco story time. This is from earlier today," Hopeless said. She scratched her knotted red hair and took a drink from her pint of beer before continuing. "Okay, can you believe this? They charged the guy in front of me in line 50 cents for a cup of ice, and that was the deal breaker for him to afford the whole thing. He kind of pawed at like 22 cents in his hand while the lady behind the register was 3 minutes from a smoke break. She was totally suffering this too, but not backing down from this fucking 50-cent cup of ice." Rin poured a wine from the box of Target brand Pinot Noir and motioned for her to continue as she sat back down at the table. "Saddest fucking thing. I stepped up and told her to put the cup of ice on my bill. Here I was paying $9.50 for pale ale at the 24/7 Trap House. Shame on me. It's my debt to society to pay this dude's ice fee. And you know what? We're keeping people poor. This guy was buying a gallon of iced tea that cost $1.79. He wanted a cup of ice to drink with it. This costs the capitalist machine literally nothing, and this person making $9.50 an hour tells this guy he's got to pay 50 cents for ice. I wanted to scream. Hopeless held her hands up in exasperation. Rin sat across from her, idly sketching Hopeless's Mapco story in a spiral-bound sketch pad. She had the man looking down dejectedly at his styrofoam cup. She cross-hatched the crushed ice as Hopeless continued. That entire store isn't worth $200. It exists as a place for cops to hang around and snag people for loitering and delinquency. I know what they're up to. Priming that recidivist machine. It might as well be a dollar store. Fuck dollar stores. It's a dollar store that sells beer and lotto tickets. The other week they put up super bright lights on the outside to deter people from hanging out. Hopeless's glasses had wiggled askew from the intensity of her rant. Every one of the lotto tickets are winners, though, Rin said quietly. Bullshit. Optimist bullshit. Hopeless leaned forward and slapped the table. Buy them all and prove me wrong, Rin said. She smirked at Hopeless and put down her charcoal pencil. Hopeless looked around Rin's tiny kitchen and came back with a witty retort. You know, that sounds like something Elliot would say. All the lottery tickets are winners at this little down-and-out bodega on Loveless Boulevard, Hopeless told her. Rin became rigid with exhausted disgust. Why do you have to bring him up? You know he drives me out of my fucking mind, she replied. Oh, you love Elliot. You spend all your time with Elliot, Hopeless said as she got up to retrieve another beer. Not by choice. He literally lives at Constellation. I don't know how he gets time to do other shit. Does he have a job? Rin scratched her head. He runs a podcast that explores the history of fonts. He has a meme page. He's the worst kind of rapist. You might almost trust him if you were somehow looking for a freelance job or some other new in town thing. I've heard him tell girls that he's a photographer. I'm sure he's rationalized in his mind that he's not a creep. He's a nice guy. He has Rick and Morty stickers on his laptop. All creeps rationalize their behavior to some extent, Hopeless said. I guess he's got a real white savior complex. Men always feel like they're going to get rewarded for their suffering, get the girl in the end, be friends with the black person they've totally patronized in service of their own poorly rationalized agenda, Rin told her. I hear you, girl. But hey, speaking of poorly rationalized agendas, Hopeless polished her glasses with the tail of her shirt as she sat back down at the bistro table. Roy Harper, Private Eye. Jesus Christ. Rin ran her hand across her face as her whispered blasphemy faded into a repressed lisp. What are you doing with your new toy? Hopeless cracked open the beer and poured it into a shaker pint. Rin stared at her succulence and wrenched her mouth into a frown. I took him to meet his daughter, to solve the mystery of her death, she said. Hopeless burst into laughter. You're kidding me. She stopped to clutch her sides. Sorry, it's not funny, but really? That sounds awful. Did you go to the scene of the crime with him and do CSI or what? Rin put her feet up on the chair and pulled her knees to her chin. She looked up at the flat red pendant light fixture and collected her thoughts. I took him to the sandbox, put him in a simulation space, and introduced him to a simulation of his daughter. Hopeless sat back in her chair and rubbed her eyes. You're losing me here. You took Harper and stuck him in another simulation that you're in charge of. Rin nodded her assent. So I'm pretty much his daughter for him, Rin told her. Hopeless chugged half of the beer and raised her ruddy eyebrows. Sick. I would tell you it's not creepy, but you wouldn't believe me, Rin said. Hopeless put her elbows on the table and leaned forward to address her. You're not exploiting the image of his daughter, are you? Is it based on real data? Hopeless asked. I don't know how I'd be exploiting it. He's in the sandbox. Whatever she says to him is something she said in a live stream, or it could just be a total dream. Wild speculation. It's 2 levels deep. She had a ton of Facebook Live footage. It's public domain. Plus, the simulation wasn't that long. It seemed long for me, but it was probably like 15 minutes. That does not sound relaxing at all, Hopeless said. Hanging out with him is not relaxing, Rin replied. Why are you doing it then? What do you gain from that? Rin looked out the darkened window at the flickering streetlight outside and felt a lump grow in her throat. More specifically, what do you gain from exploring this character through his loss? Rin leafed through her sketchbook. I gain insight into how I imagine the lives of others. Hopeless took a drink of her beer and proposed a question. What would you do in this space if you had all the time in the world? I bet you could come up with something amazing for yourself. Definitely something better than this. What would you do? Rin doodled tiny argyle patterns around the edge of a page as she thought. I would be somebody else. For somebody else. Like role-playing? Sort of, but more basic than that. Just someone else that wasn't me. Maybe that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's theater. Hopeless lowered her gaze to the table and folded a napkin. Theater has to have an audience. Is he the audience, or are you? I don't want to make you feel shame because you think that I think that this is weird. I don't think it's that weird. But is it healthy? Why do you want to be someone else? Rin couldn't make eye contact with her. She tied the strings of her hoodie into a knot and stared at the edge of the table. Who are you really being for him? Is it his daughter or is it you? Who would Kevin want you to be for him? Rin silently started to cry. She sniffled and clumsily wiped her face. Hopeless sat back in her chair and sighed. Shit. I'm sorry. Don't clam up on me. Let's change the subject. Don't lose me tonight. Come here. Hopeless shifted up and out of the chair and wrapped Rin up in a hug. Rin stared glassy-eyed at a specific point between a hanging pan and a copper teapot on the kitchen wall. You can draw and simulate and be whoever you want to be, but not while I'm here to entertain you. I want you to be you, Hopeless told her. Rin smiled. Photosynthesis. Photosynthesis. She looked up at the freckled mess of a woman before her. She had a tiny tattoo of a vinyl record behind her ear. You're my garbage pile, Rin said. People throw away valuable shit. Hopeless's glasses creaked as she pressed in to give Rin a soft kiss. Rin met her with force. She suppressed her nauseating uncertainty and sat up straight as they parted. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and took a deep breath. Can we do the skeleton dance? Rin asked. You're damn right we can do the skeleton dance. Hopeless picked up her phone and tapped around until she found the tune. She put her phone down into a ceramic bowl on the cafe table and pressed play. Rin covered her face. She was already laughing. Hopeless bent her knees in anticipation. As the beat came down, they started to flail and shake their arms with bony abandon. The beat built stronger and stronger. They hopped 90 degrees to the left, 90 degrees to put their backs to one another. Rin couldn't suppress her giggles. The chorus was a few seconds away. 90 degrees to the left, and back to face each other. Hopeless had her eyes crossed. Now, high step, slap your knees. Rin burst out laughing as she tapped the tops of her thighs. Hopeless shook her cheeks and stared up at the ceiling as they descended into blissful drunken nonsense, dancing as if it were just Helga and Alicia left on Earth. Chapter 18. From notebook number 57, pages 6 through 10. The following is a by no means complete list of the dozens of custom simulations that I've designed and rendered for experienced salons, in order of my favorite to the biggest regrets of my entire life, as of July 2017. A field of fireflies in perpetual twilight with a campfire of hemlock and pine. A complete reproduction of a teenage girl's room from 1992 with Rolling Stone magazines of which I hand-scanned every page, dozens of listenable CDs, different weather patterns outside the window, and secret notes hidden in drawers. Glacier Point, Yosemite National Park. A complete first-person recreation of the X-Files episode, Season 5, 12, Bad Blood. The stage of the Grand Ole Opry featuring operating simulations of Willie Nelson and Casey Musgraves that play songs along with the Traveler, complete with thousands of adoring fans. The Coney Island hot dog eating contest rigged so that the subject miraculously wins. Hunting and successfully capturing Bigfoot. This was a smash hit for some reason. So many things with dinosaurs that I don't even know where to begin. The funeral of a traveler's father with most of the detail given to the saltwater fish tank in the lobby of the mortuary. A room that's filled floor to ceiling with pink and blue balloons. The moon landing, which could be undertaken as either Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, or Michael Collins. Almost nobody ever chose Michael Collins. One guy chose him and asked for a refund after the experience because he didn't know that Collins, as command module pilot, never got to actually walk on the moon. I told him if he felt slighted, to Think about how Michael Collins must have felt. At least 15 different variations of an ex-lover serendipitously falling back in love with the mook. An endless cellar of wine with all bottles available for consumption. Side note, I don't know how to make a specific taste available in simulations, but the guy who designed this swore on his life that he could try whatever vintage of whatever wine he wanted and that it was 100% authentic. Allegedly, he was a rich lawyer who had stopped drinking due to a few DUIs. He had well over 100 experiences in his little wine cave. Leo bought him his own robe for being the first member of the 100 Club. At least 5 zombie survival scenarios, most of which devolved into sex with NPC survivors. The biblically accurate crucifixion and subsequent revival of Jesus, also a smash hit. A staging of every stupid comic book movie you can think of. The assassination of a United States senator. An act of domestic terrorism in which a bomb is successfully detonated in a strategic location and the mook gets away with it. A white-walled room with a bed and a child. A child's bedroom with a bed and a child.
On the next Detour Hotel.
I think about this constantly. Like, I'm possibly everyone. I'm that guy. I'm gonna be that guy's kid. But I'm them in some other order. I've probably already been them before. Or I'm being them now and I can't tell because I'm stuck in my own mind, she said. You're saying it's like we've been making loops in this life like you're in purgatory, taking your turn being each person unconsciously. Sure, the conscious or unconscious part is even debatable, she told him. You've been me before, he asked. I'm being you this very minute, she said.
Detour Hotel is written, recorded, and produced by me, Aaron Rogge, in rainy Nashville, Tennessee. Additional music by Lee Rosevere, Airglow, and Soft and Furious, licensed under Creative Commons 3.0. This work is adapted from a novel of the same name by the same person and is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real people or occurrences is a coincidence. Paperback and Kindle versions of Detour Hotel are available on Amazon. Thanks for listening.